Welcome to the Lost in Transition podcast. I am your host, Chris Gerard. Glad to have you along with us here in the middle of June, in the middle of race season for most of you. I'm actually finally going to start off this weekend, a little bit of a slow start on the triathlon season this year, but getting to it just as things heat up. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Also available on the TuneIn Radio app and available for listening anytime at our website, losttransition.com. Facebook and Twitter get you the social media updates. Connect with us there and let us know what you'd like to hear on our upcoming shows. In fact, coming up in a couple of weeks, we have, back by popular demand, Dr. Kevin Sprouse. He's the sports medicine mind behind Podium Sports Medicine and the team doctor for the Cannondale Pro Cycling Team. Looking forward to catching up with him, and he's always got good information that he brings to the show. Tonight, talking to Jamie Ann Phillips, triathlete turned marathon swimmer, currently training for a 28-mile marathon swim around Manhattan coming up in August. We talk about her experiences with Swim the Suck, also down in Chattanooga, swim out in San Francisco Bay last fall, and a swim in Charleston earlier this year. Her training routine and also the skills of triathlon that transferred well to marathon swimming, besides the swimming element itself, of course. We talk to her next, right after the break. This is the Lost in Transition podcast. Jamie Ann Phillips is an Ironman marathon swimmer, a veteran of Chattanooga's Swim the Suck. She's survived being shark bait in several of the world's oceans and is prepping for a 28-mile swim around Manhattan in just a couple months. Jamie Ann, glad to have you with us on Lost in Transition.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so you are a marathon swimmer, but also started sprint triathlon, I believe, back around 2009, and kind of stayed at the sprint distance for a while. Never really wanted to do an Ironman, but then I guess you had this friend that did one, and I'll let you take it from there. How did you get roped into doing a full Ironman?
I started doing triathlon when I lived in Tuscaloosa, so I didn't really have any friends that did anything long. So I moved to Chattanooga and immediately got immersed in the community here. I trained with several people that had done Ironmans or were doing them. And, of course, in Chattanooga, got awarded an Ironman, and that was a big deal to all my friends. But still, I was not going to sign up. And then I went and watched some friends the year before the inaugural Chattanooga. I went and watched some friends, I guess that was 2013, do Ironman Florida. And it inspired me. And I thought, if I'm going to do any race, it would be Florida because the swim is hard and Chattanooga's is not. So on a whim, on the drive back, I was on my iPhone and got into Florida, which back then I think it was pretty hard to do. And so I thought, this is it. This is a sign. I need to do it. Which was great because all my friends were doing the 2014 Chattanooga Ironman. And so I had a million training buddies, and that ended up being my entire 2014 leading up to Ironman Florida.
As part of that process, I understand along the way, you stress fractured, was it to your right foot?
Yeah, through running. I've always had injuries because of running, so it's definitely not my sport, but definitely had a stress fracture reaction happen about mid-July, training for Ironman, which was in November. So basically the last half of my training was centered around me in a boot.
Oh. Were you able to, did you do any pool running or, like the Ultra T treadmill? Did you do anything like that to continue training?
Yeah. So basically I felt like from July to November, I was either wet in the pool or river, aqua jogging or swimming, or I was on my bike. So instead of running, my coach just had me aqua jog a lot, swim more, and bike a ton more. So that's basically what I did.
And that adaptation seemed to work fairly well for you. You get down there to Florida, though, and standing on the beach, and what do you know? They cancel the swim. Isn't that the worst?
Yeah, I will say I might have thrown whatever I was holding, and I might have thrown out a few cuss words. But I have to say that about 3 weeks prior, I had done Swim the Suck for my second time and placed third overall female. So it's kind of like, I don't have to prove this, but dang it. I was really pretty mad. But in the end, I can understand why they had to cancel it, but I was pretty sour about it for about 72 hours probably.
How far in advance did you know? Was it a morning of call that they made that year?
We were on the beach in our wetsuits.
All right.
Wow.
About as last minute. Well, I'll take it back. There are sometimes it's been canceled after a few waves.
There's people in the water, yeah. And, they're
and
like,
they start
never
struggling
mind.
and they call the rest of it off. So, but how did that race go for you after it was a time trial bike start, I guess, at that point?
Yeah, time trial bike start sucks. It was not the first time I'd had to do one, actually. I had been to Panama City earlier that year to do the previously known Gulf Coast Triathlon, which was a half Ironman. They had canceled the swim that day as well. So I'm not going to Florida to race again, basically, because I don't have good luck.
You're over that. I hear you.
If you can imagine 2,000 to 3,000 Ironman athletes in a parking lot in 40-degree weather with about 30-mile-per-hour winds, that's what happened for about an hour before we started. So I think it was just an interesting change of a race day for me. And you can imagine on the bike course, everyone's basically, drafting because we can't help it. The winds were so bad, I was pushed off into the grass, I think more than once. Didn't crash, thankfully. But it's a flat course, but still, luckily I had trained on heart rate, so I just basically watched my heart rate and not my speed the entire day because I knew the wind was going to play a major factor in both. But yeah, I was still happy. I did get a penalty because they said I was drafting, which everyone was. So I got to go to the penalty tent, but I was still pretty happy with my time, even with that. I think it was like a 4-minute penalty they put on top of you.
Well, congratulations. It's even though it's probably not your passion to do Ironmans, it's kind of nice to check that box and know that you did do it, though.
Yeah, definitely checked the box, and everyone kept telling me that I'm not going to be one and done because they canceled the swim. And that was 2014, and we're nearing almost 3 years since I did Ironman, and I can say I'm pretty comfortable being a one and done.
Ironman in the rearview mirror.
Well, and you certainly have nothing to prove on the swim. The open water swimming aspect, did that come before or after the triathlon? What started first for you?
It came after. I was a pool swimmer on and off all through my childhood, and then I got into a master's swimming group in grad school. But swimming was always definitely my strong suit, but open water swimming was not something I regularly did until triathlon, and definitely not until probably 2012 when I started swimming with the local CALS group here, which is the Chattanooga Open Water Swimmers. When
you started into that, what were some of the races that you did right away? Was Swim the Suck one of the first ones you worked toward? And what kind of distance? Obviously with Ironman, the longest you possibly get in triathlon is 2.4, and that's a pretty short open water race as far as things go.
So I guess it was 2012 when I really, really started swimming with the CALS and making friends. And they were all doing Swim the Suck. And towards the end of the season, I was kind of jealous. I was like, all my friends are doing this awesome race, and it's sold out, and I can't do it. So, of course, I supported them any way I could. And there's a small 1-mile race here the Wednesday before Swim the Suck every year. It's called Snail Darter. I did that. And so I was like, gosh darn it, next year I'm joining my friends. And so I think that was back when registration was on New Year's Day. So from then on, it's really 2013 was when I really even did any events leading up to Swim the Suck. And honestly, I can't recall because we have the Rat Race here in town, and that's in June, and that's a 4.5 miler. But I don't think I did that one until like 2014 or 2015, just due to friends getting married and me having to go to weddings instead of
race like you really wanted to.
Yeah. It happens.
Yeah,
it's a hazard of life.
June
right
seems
there.
to be a popular time for that.
Yeah.
So as you're working your way up the distances, then you obviously had trained as a triathlete. What were some of the things that were the same between your triathlon and open water swims, and what were some of the things that maybe were different or that you didn't expect as you kind of transitioned from one sport to the other?
I guess since I was in Tuscaloosa and I got into that master swim routine and learning workouts better, I feel like until I joined the Chattanooga Open Water Swimmers, pool workouts were enough for me for triathlon. I didn't need to go do any kind of open water river swim. I was fine. And I was still like first out of the water, especially my age group, or part of the lead pack in the water. I didn't need any kind of open water training. But it was until I really started training for my first swim the Suck, which was 2013, that I really started integrating those long weekend swims in. So I'd say that's the biggest differentiator. But now it's more structured in how many yards I'm getting in the pool and how many yards I'm getting open water now. Before in triathlon, I didn't even consider that at all.
Let's dive into that a little bit then. As far as open water versus pool swim today, what does that training regimen look like as far as the breakdown of distances and what even qualifies as a long swim for somebody doing a 28-mile swim? I think of long runs when you're doing a marathon. I mean, it's got to be significant.
The time is probably comparable there. Like if you're a marathon runner and you're going out for a training run, towards the end of your training, you're going to start doing 2+ hour runs, most likely, pretty regularly. I would say that's the same for marathon swim training. Right now, it's really difficult, but you take what you can get. As you may know, the river here in Chattanooga moves really, really fast some days, really, really not fast. But no matter what, there's a current. So you really have to know the currents to get in your long swim. So for me, in May, the water was really, really fast. So I was able to throw out 11-mile swims on the weekends, no problem, because it really only took 2.5 hours to do that. But this past weekend, I came up and swam in Knoxville and did a 9-mile swim, and that took 3.5 hours because the current's much slower up there. So it really just, for me, I'm a nerd and I have a spreadsheet. So I have the yards per week that my coach has me building up, just like marathon run training or triathlon training. You're going to build up and then you're going to taper. So right now I'm slowly building up. I'm currently at 37,000 yards a week. So I look at that number. I look at the routes I know I have in the river that are available to me because I've been swimming in this river so long. I know the certain distances from boat put-ins and takeouts that I can actually swim. So I kind of base my training on that and say, okay, this will be my long swim this weekend. Here's the yards that will be. And I kind of back it up throughout my week. So I back it up to Monday. And every Tuesday, Thursday, I always swim a long, hard pool set. Well, not fast being hard, but just long and basically trying to set that pace that hopefully I'm going to be swimming around Manhattan. But then Monday might be kind of a recovery swim from the previous long weekend. Wednesday might be a fun, relaxed, open water swim with the cows. But then Friday morning is always kind of middle of the pack range, fast speed workout, kind of depending how many more yards I need that week. So usually around 4,000 or 5,000 yards. I do that at the Macaulay pool here in town because they have some fast swimmers that I can set a good pace with and do a speed workout with. So that's another thing is I jump between 3 different pools every week and the river or whatever I can get. Like last weekend, I came up to Knoxville because it was a change of scenery and it was nice to go up there and have that change.
So how do you fit everything in? I mean, so 37,000 yards is probably easily 10 times more than I would do in a week. And I know just getting to the pool and just sort of managing my schedule just to even do that can sometimes be a struggle. So how do you get all this in?
For a while now, I have been doing that Tuesday, Thursday swim routine with my friend Kim. She's awesome and very flexible with my craziness. And we've been meeting at like 5:45 in the morning for years. Well, now we're meeting at 5 a.m. because of so many yards I need to get in. So basically, I have to do it in the mornings most of the time. I do let myself sleep in on Monday mornings. And sleeping in is 7 a.m. But so then I do my recovery swim in the evening just so I know I can get another day's rest in, another sleep in to start my week. But then Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'm waking up around 4:15 in the morning and going and swimming for 2 or so hours before I start getting ready for work. And then Wednesday evenings are the cow swims. And then I have to plan either Saturday or Sunday, depending on weather and depending on pilots, on what day will be my long swim, and that's usually in the morning. So I basically have to plan accordingly to any other life event that might be happening. For instance, Father's Day is this Sunday, so I'm having to figure out Saturday as my long swim, and there's a wedding shower I have to be at in the afternoon, so I have to make sure I get really early in the water on Saturday, and that's basically the same battle every week.
Now, do you do anything else besides swimming? Are you cross-training with other sports or strength training?
Well, so that's an interesting question, because when I did Ironman in 2014, that was, to me, my best swim the suck I've had. And I've done 4 swim the sucks. And to me, the way I felt, my speed, my place in the field, I did my best. So, I mean, you know how much Ironman training takes, and that was my best swim. So there's probably something to be said for that. But my current coach, who is a marathon swimmer himself, and he's amazing, he does not recommend me doing any biking. He said the biking will not do any good for me. And I think it was about 2 months ago, he was like, yeah, sure, you can run a little bit, but you're going to be too tired too. And he's right. I got to the point where I had to I got to the point with my friend that I run with, and I basically had to break up with her and be like, I can't do this anymore. I'm too tired. And it's not so much tiredness either, but it's also you kind of need some freedom in your life to hang out with family and friends. And so I like to try to keep that balance and try to maintain a normal life. But it is sad to walk past my bikes, because my bikes are in my the mudroom right beside the door I walk in and out of every day, so I have to stare at them and say sorry. But I do a little bit of the YMCA offers like a body pump class. I do a little bit of that just to kind of keep my legs, toned in or anything else. My swim coach will not allow me to do push-ups, which I'm totally fine with, but just stuff like that. It's been interesting seeing the changes from just normal Ironman training or triathlon training to now focusing on marathon swimming and seeing what I can and can't do and what might work best for me now.
Going hand in hand with all of with the fatigue, the training, and the other comparisons to Ironman, how is your appetite? Do you, I know when you're training this much, you've got to feed the body. Do you feel like, you can sit down and like have a grand slam every time you eat? Is it just crazy?
I've kind of always been like that. So I consider myself a pretty big eater. My boyfriend, I could out-eat him any day, but I guess that's just the part of being a swimmer. But I did go to a nutritionist earlier this year just to kind of sit down and say, what's up? What do I need to do? And luckily, he is actually an Ironman himself, so he gets it. And he told me the protein levels I should be getting a day, and he wants me getting, at least 23 to 2,500 calories a day, especially on my long days. And I tracked that for about 3 months and saw that I was pretty much hitting that goal with no problem. Mm-hmm. So there are days, though, where I feel really full and don't want to eat, and there's some long swims where I don't want to eat. But then this past weekend, like 2 or 3 miles in, my pilot was like, hey, do you want to eat? And I was like, yeah, if you have a hamburger. And all I could think about was a hamburger my entire swim. So we went and got a hamburger after the swim. But it's just different from day to day. I'm now realizing how important protein really is for something like this. Mm-hmm. And then also I'm learning, I found it surprising, my nutritionist told me don't eat in the mornings before your swim. And I'm actually and I thought that was interesting. And then I am reading an open water swimming book right now about the English Channel, and it's about a woman that did it in the 90s, and she also was told by her coach not to eat before her training swims. So I've been doing that for a while now. But honestly, luckily for me, swimming, I can pretty much eat anything. And I don't have any issues. It's like running is when I have the issues with eating. But luckily for swimming, I have no problem. My appetite seems fine. My weight surprisingly climbed. I did swim, I forget how many miles I swam last year. I think 500 or so miles last year, which was the most I'd swam in a year. And I gained weight. So I think that's something I'm seeing transitioning off of triathlon training, where you have a lot of the weight bearing running and low heart rate bike, all that kind of stuff. I don't have that anymore. And so my body, I think, is kind of adjusting to that.
Sure.
And now my weight started coming down a few pounds about late April, early May, which I was kind of excited about. But my nutritionist was like, no, that means you're not getting enough calories. You need to eat more.
Yes.
Swimming's interesting in that way, that I think body fat, a little bit of it, taken into consideration, is a good thing for swimmers, especially if you're a cold water swimmer. So it's been very interesting learning that and seeing my body maybe adjust correctly to it.
It's extra nasty that a lot of waterfronts have restaurants placed right on them for you to smell as you go by. I'm thinking here in Knoxville, the Calhoun's on the River barbecue joint, and every time I swim by that or run by that, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
That's exactly where I wanted my hamburger.
Oh. You know
Coincidence?
What?
Maybe.
They've got good ones if you want those. It's funny you talk about going back to the point you made about feeling a little sad walking by your bikes. One place you probably don't miss them is when you have to pack them up and haul them to a race. And you've gone to a lot of really cool locations with open water swimming where you don't have to haul a bike and fly it out there. So that must be kind of nice. Did that open up maybe some travel opportunities that weren't as convenient perhaps with triathlon?
Well, yeah, so the reason I was in San Francisco last year is because my boyfriend had a work conference out there. So we tacked on a couple days, and I went out there with him and threw my swim cap and goggles literally in my bag. That's all you need. And it was awesome. I got to swim in the bay twice, and really no solid plans to do that, but you only need your swim cap and goggles. I guess it's the same for running. It was interesting. I'm glad that I went to Vermont last year and did that Kingdom Swim, which is a 25K swim where you actually swim into Canada and back. So we had to have our passports. And so it was an interesting packing thing, because you're like, I'm not really going out of the country, but okay, I'll bring my passport. So my pilot had to have my passport on their boat just in case. But, packing for that, it was the first time I had really packed for a big event and flown to it. And I was like, well, I really don't need that much.
It's kind of anticlimactic, isn't it?
I packed my own water bottles just so I could mix my powders and whatever in those. And I packed a small towel, not very big. So that took up some space. But no, I really didn't need anything, because we stopped at a grocery store in Vermont to buy any kind of food we wanted. And that's another great thing about swimming, is you don't really worry too much about the food, because it's pretty easy to have food on your boat instead of in your back pockets on your bike, or, tri-kit pockets while you're running in a triathlon, whatever. But super easy and not stressful at all.
The Border Buster swim, you mentioned one of the first ones you kind of traveled to, and you mentioned the logistics, obviously, of having passport with you. There's actually an international half marathon I'm looking at, and full marathon up in Detroit, that does the same thing, crosses the border, and you have to carry it with you, and probably won't get asked for it, but you never know, type thing. What was the course like there? Was it how long of a swim? What were the conditions? So upstate Vermont, I take it, and is that Quebec across the water there, or Ontario?
Oh gosh,
it was Canada. We know that much.
I think it's pretty.
This
close.
Isn't a geography test.
No, it's pretty close to the border. I think it is Quebec. Yeah.
Well, if you're looking at a computer, I stayed in the town of Newport, Vermont, which is upstate Vermont, obviously, and we flew into Boston and drove up, and it was a beautiful drive. Mm-hmm. And Newport is a tiny speck on the map, if at all. And the lake is called Lake Nymphrey Magog. I could try to spell that for you, but maybe you'll find it on the map.
That's what Google's for.
Yeah. And so the lake is beautiful. I think it goes a lot further than what I swam. We did a big loop in this lake, so no current. It was calm and beautiful that day. I think we got in the water at 5:30 that morning to start, and it was 40 or 50 degrees outside, but the water was a perfect 70.
Wow.
And so And I think the temperatures might have gotten up to 70 degrees that day. So it was a perfect day. The thing about the Kingdom Swim, Phil White is the race director, and he's hilarious and crazy for these outdoor events. And, you know, he's one of those guys, you got to love him. But he does way more than these swims. But he has other distances going on that day as far as swims. And I think there was a 10-mile. There was the Border Buster, which is the longest, so it's 25K. And then there's a 10-mile. And then I think there might have been like 2 other distances, and maybe, you know, the smallest being a 1 mile. But how he did it was, we started first, the Border Buster started first, and then like 30 minutes to an hour later, the 10-mile started, and so on and so on. So we were all kind of finishing around the same time at the same finish line. So that was cool. When I started, and we all had different caps on, so when I started seeing the 10-mile caps, I was like, oh, cool, you know, I'm catching up with the 10-milers. And now, because we kind of, our course would kind of meet up in the same spot eventually. But yeah, calm water, perfect day for it. Beer at the finish, which is also a favorite thing of mine. So I couldn't complain, and I ended up 3rd overall female, surprisingly.
One of the cool things I think about, like you mentioned, everybody starting staggered like that too, is it probably makes the finish line atmosphere a little bit better. I know sometimes when you do, like when I do triathlons with multiple distance events, if I'm doing one of the longer ones, it kind of starts to get cleaned out by the time, especially once you get toward the last finishers of a half Ironman or something like that. It can be kind of deserted. So that's kind of cool that you're able to all finish together like that. Also, San Francisco Bay, that was something you said you did get the chance actually to have a boat take you out to Alcatraz and swim back. Now, my reference point for swimming in San Francisco Bay is not from open water swimming. It's from Mythbusters when Adam Savage tried to escape the rock of the homemade raft from the prison. But I do recall one element from that episode, and it was that the current around Marin Headlands there is very strong, and you have to be aiming a little bit off where you actually want to end up where, you know, with that, and not get swept out to sea. What was the conditions like when you were out there in the bay, and how was that swim?
Well, the bay, what's really cool about the open water swimmers there is they learn so much about the tides. It's either in an ebb or a flood, and I can't tell you which it was the day I swam. Considering how I aimed, I was maybe in a flood, so that means the water was coming into the bay. So it really just depends on the time of day you're out there and what's happening in regards to that. But the swimmers there will swim regardless what's happening, as far as if it's an ebb or a flood. But the guy that took me out in the boat had the tide book out there with him, and he said, okay, aim for that building and don't stop aiming for that building. I was like, okay. And I basically got off the boat, stood on the island. He took a picture of me on the island, and then I went for it. It was 62 degrees, I think, in the water, and I think 47 degrees outside. So that was a really cold boat ride because, like I said, I only packed my swimsuit and goggles. I think he might have thrown a jacket on me or something in the boat ride. But my boyfriend came along and got to ride on the boat, and it was, I think, like 6 a.m. or something crazy. And I had no issue with any kind of tide at all. As long as I aimed for those buildings, I was fine. Now, I do have some experience here in Chattanooga with crossing the river here with the current, so maybe, you know, because of that, I'm pretty good with kind of keeping my line. But I had no problems. I swam straight to Aquatic Park, where I then exited the beach to the South End Rowing Club. But it took, I think the other day, my friend asked me how long it took, and I tried to find my Garmin file for it, and I think it took me like 31 minutes, and it's like a 1.5 or 1.2-ish mile swim. So yeah, I had no problems, and I tried not to think about sharks.
That brings up an interesting point, wondering what you are thinking about. I mean, in a swim like that, where it's technical, you know, and you're having to focus on the buildings, is that enough, or are you thinking, what else are you thinking about while you're out there on these long distance swims?
Well, for that swim, it was really short, but I was so excited. I was so excited to get to do it. It was really cool because the boat stayed behind me. so I couldn't see them at all. So I felt like I was literally out in the bay by myself, which is a really exhilarating feeling. And I breathe on my right, so I could see Alcatraz and I could see the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge every time I took a breath, if I wasn't sighting for that building. So for me, it went by super quickly, and it was super exciting. And a couple days before, I had swam the bay with the South Enders, and my boyfriend had seen, I think it was like either a sea lion or a seal pop up right beside me. And I kind of thought about that a little bit, like, oh, I hope I don't see a shark or a sea lion. Oh, I'm not here by myself. But then it was over. It was just a really cool thing. One of those experiences where you're like, every breath I take, every sight I see, I don't want to forget it. This is really awesome.
It sounds like you not only you're excited, but you're able to stay calm. What about on a longer swim? You know, how does that play out? Like, obviously, you're at the Border Busters, 25K, and you're out there for more than 31 minutes. So what goes on in your mind on that longer swim?
So that longer swim, I actually went out there for Vermont. I did that with two of my friends from here. And so that was awesome. We stayed together for the first 4 or 5 miles. And it was fun. We took every feeding together. We laughed. We giggled. I mean, we're a pretty laid-back group, so we were just having fun. And then we kind of slowly progressed to where we were dropping one another. So by the time I was in Canada, I was by myself. But I was fine. I was just thinking, no, your shoulder doesn't hurt. Just keep going. And I had packed a whole bunch of food on that boat, so I kept thinking, what am I going to eat next? What am I going to eat in my next stop? I think at 12 miles, I ate a Snickers bar. I thought about that a lot. And then the end was really frustrating, and y'all could probably agree with this, but I could not see the finish line until I was basically on it. I was in that water for 8 hours and 48 minutes, which I hope New York takes less time. But I kept thinking for the last probably hour, where's that finish line? So it's interesting what you can kind of think about when you're swimming, but maybe I'm just used to it by now. I can kind of numb out any crazy thoughts.
So you mentioned New York. Tell us about, you have a swim coming up, the 20 Bridges swim, is that correct?
Yes, that's the big one I'm training for this year. It's called 20 Bridges. It was previously known as the Manhattan Island Marathon Swim. It's a very popular swim in the open water world. It's part of the Triple Crown. So this is the cheapest of the three and the most, and the quickest or the easiest travel for me. So that's kind of why I picked it. And I think that's really cool to say you swam around New York City. It's a 28.5 counterclockwise swim of Manhattan Island, but there's currents. So that's another thing about the tides is learning those in some of my past swims will prove probably hopefully beneficial. Because it is a tide-assisted swim, and if you kind of have to make the turns around Manhattan in a certain time frame to catch the next tide, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Counterclockwise, is that up the East River and down the Hudson?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I know the Hudson is also known. I know there was, I don't know if it was an Ironman race or another triathlon I had up there at one point, but the swim times for they were averaging 5, 6, 7 miles an hour, or even people that weren't that fast as swimmers, because it was so incredibly nuts. So hopefully the nice part about that is you should get all that down current right at the very end.
That's what I'm hoping for. I do have an interesting start. So if you look on the website, you can go to the entrance for this year, the people that are doing it this year. There's 4 different weekends that they're doing it because it's such a popular swim and they only have so many boats. They spread it out over 4 different weekends, 1 weekend a month. I think it's June through September, and mine's in August. Most people start from the Battery, which is kind of I feel like the normal Manhattan Island marathon swim route, but I'm actually starting from Mill Rock, which is in the East River before obviously it hits the Harlem. It's this tiny island, and I have to Google it all the time to remember where it even is. But I think I'm boarding a boat, and a boat takes us out there to the start.
So starting a little bit further upstream than typically than you would. So your finish will also be coming back up on the East River side then to complete that.
Right.
Complete that circumnavigation.
I'll do the entire Hudson, wave to the Statue of Liberty, and then make a turn, I guess, and come back up the East River.
this swim in particular, you mentioned it's a part of the Triple Crown. What is that, and what are the other swims that are part of that?
So the Triple Crown is the English Channel, Manhattan Island, and the Catalina Channel. So if you do all three, you've basically can say you've completed the Triple Crown. And then some people even try to complete it within the same calendar year, which is really difficult based on how you can get in, because basically most of these swims you have to get in a year in advance. English Channel is probably more like 2 years. So, but those are the three big ones. So that's why this is one of the more famous open water swims.
Is the English Channel something that maybe is on your radar for the future?
I just don't know if I can spend that much money, honestly.
We'll start a GoFundMe. We can make that happen, right?
Yeah, everybody.
If someone paid your way, you know.
If someone paid my way, yes, I would consider it. I think I've got the willpower to do it. My friend right now, she's training for it, and her biggest challenge is finding cold water. You know, we live in the South, and you've got to train in cold water for that. I'm reading a book, like I said, right now. It's called The Dover Solo. Then there's the 6-hour qualifying swim for the English Channel. So you've got to find somewhere to go do that, because it's got to be, I think, in 60-degree water or colder in order to qualify as well. And not to mention, I'm not sure how much the English Channel costs, but it's the most expensive of them all. Before it's all said and done, I would not be surprised if you spend $10,000 to $20,000.
Makes an Ironman look cheap.
Yeah, really. Well, when you factor in the travel and, you know, I mean, the logistics of just getting there, and like you say, doing that other swim is probably for you would mean traveling somewhere and arranging to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to throw out an actual figure just to get in that swim, because I haven't done it. I don't know. My head is telling me around $5,000 just to get into the swim, but I don't know that for sure. I haven't even looked up that at all, but because you also have to pay for your boat, and finding a boat is difficult, and doing all that after you've already been approved entry and that kind of stuff. So Manhattan was a lot more feasible for me right now in my life, and the cost, I just couldn't swallow that right now.
So now you mentioned you having to find a boat, and I know for a lot of like the smaller races around here, like Swim the Suck, for instance, you have to have a dedicated pilot. You have someone in a kayak who's sort of keeping you company, keeping tabs on you, feeding you, whatnot, as you make your way through the race. On these other events, like the swim around Manhattan and the English Channel, or even your Border Buster, did you also have to have a dedicated pilot with you?
Yes. So for Border Buster, I had a friend actually at the time who lived in Vermont, and she drove up and piloted for me. Even though the race director, if you paid a certain amount extra on top of your race fee, he would get the kayak and a pilot for you. Luckily, I had a friend willing to do it. But New York, that is all included. So for New York, for 20 Bridges, I think I get a boat. I don't know how big it is, but I know that I get to bring 2 people that get to be on it. So that's a motorized boat. And I think there's an observer on that boat as well to, I guess, basically kind of referee my swim.
Right. That's correct.
For lack of a better word. And then there's the captain of that boat. And then I'm pretty sure I also have a kayaker that will be alongside me.
I was about to say they're going to get tired after 28 miles, but you're swimming it. So I guess their problems are pretty small compared to yours.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to feel too bad for them.
So that's coming up in August. I believe you go off on the 19th. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my day. I think I also have a rain day, and I think that's the 18th. So they give us a window of 2 days. Gotcha.
Well, that sounds like a lot of craziness. I can't even say fun.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is for you, and that's awesome. And then I guess Swim the Suck is on the calendar again for this year. This will be number 5, right?
Yeah, this will be number 5. Swim the Suck is October 14th, I think. And then I'm also doing Bridges to Bluff in Knoxville.
All right.
Hey, local race.
I know I need to plug that. But yeah, I'll be doing that. I think, I guess that's like September 17th-ish, something like that.
Well, and we've always been pushing open water swim races as a great skills enhancer for triathletes, especially some of the shorter ones. Obviously, what you do is just absolutely nuts on the far end of the 20-plus miles.
Come on.
But
give it a chance. You just need to get in the pool a little bit more.
I need to get back out in the open water. But obviously there are places that have 5K, even 1 mile, and it's interesting for people to do that solo event. And but yeah, it's been a lot of fun having you on the program, and best of luck in the rest of your year. And if folks want to follow you, is there any place where they should go to find out more about your upcoming swims?
I feel like I don't post very much, but my Facebook, if anybody wants to ask me questions, I've had a few people from Knoxville that are doing Bridges to Bluffs or Swim the Suck reach out to me. I'm happy to help anyone or answer any kind of questions I have. So I'm on Facebook. My full name's Jamie Ann Phillips. I'm happy to help anybody.
Sure, and look up Chattanooga Open Water Swimmers as well if you're in that area. Knoxville's Cows, a very blatant ripoff of Chattanooga's Cows, spelled with a K.
All the respect.
With all due respect. It's an homage. We'll call it that.
Yes.
Available for people here locally in the Southeast, and lots of fun having you on the program. Send us pictures when you get done. We'll be glad to post those up on the Facebook page, and looking forward to seeing you with those tall buildings in the background.
Okay, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Follow us online at losttransition.com. Facebook and Twitter get you the social media updates. And if you listen and enjoy the show, please rate and review on your podcast app. It helps boost us in the rankings and learn what you like about the show so we can keep making it better and reach more triathletes out there. Also, check out our partners over the Crushing Iron podcast. Recent shows include rebounding from a subpar race or not meeting training expectations, and we've all been there at one time or another. And part 2 of a series on training with power meters. New episodes each week, Monday and Thursday. Check them out at crushingiron.com. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks with Dr. Kevin Sprouse. For Lana Burl, I'm Chris Gerard. And until next time, may all your transitions be smooth.